Okay, so thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and together with my panelists, whom I've met for the first time, except for Gwen, we're all very happy to be here. And we're here to talk about innovation versus productivity, right? And we'll all be sharing a little personal story of how, in some way, innovation has helped us in our business. So, being the moderator, I have a little bit of an advantage, so I'll start first. I think for us, if you look at the 21st century, we're looking at exponential growth. So you have 21st century versus 20th century industrial model. So if you think about it, Coca-Cola took 140 years to be a global brand. Facebook took 9. McDonald's took 40 years to be a $91 billion company. Facebook took 9. So if you want exponential growth, you have to adopt some of the principles that come with the 21st century. You cannot stay in the 20th century business model and go, I want exponential growth. In that world, you get incremental growth. So similarly, when you look at Singapore, what got us here has been, look, let's face it, in the 60s and 70s, we were innovative. Then we became highly productive. And productivity now is, again, I say, incremental growth. So we need to go to the next stage of exponential growth. And to that, we just have to apply. I'm sure as we talk about it, our panelists will talk about what are the principles and what are the guidelines, or some of the values that you have to embrace for exponential growth. So from a personal story, how many of you are Singaporeans? Can I see a hand? Okay. So I was born in the late 60s. And I grew up in this world in Singapore where if you don't have a degree, you find it very hard to succeed in life. Okay? And I think in some ways it's still the same now. So when I grew up, I only had 4 O-levels. Went to college, private college, didn't do well. Basically, I had 4 O-levels. So I finished my army, and my father said, I'll mortgage the house, the apartment. We lived in Block 37, Bedok South, 4-room HDB flat. So my dad said, I'm going to mortgage the HDB flat and send you to a university in Australia. By which time, when I came out from army, I was 21 years old. I was wise enough to know if I go to Australia, I would not come back with a degree. I just wouldn't. I knew. I might come back a father, okay? But I wouldn't come back with a degree. I was very clear. So I decided not to. So I decided to start off on my own, and my father didn't speak to me for like a year or 2. Okay? So that was the stage where I was at. And this is at the most personal level, 4 O-levels in a country where you need a degree to survive or to get ahead in life. What do? Do you be more productive or do you be more innovative? So at a personal level, that was the decision I took. And I worked in several odd jobs, and somehow I stumbled onto advertising. So my career has been largely for the past 23 years in advertising. And I worked my way up. I did very well. And advertising was all about ideas. It was not about set protocols or guidelines. It's about how fresh, how different, how an idea could make you uncomfortable and stand out, rather than conforming and being the same. Because my job was to create ads that would stand out in the newspaper, ads that would compete with news stories, rather than ads that blend into everything else. So that was the culture I grew up and got accustomed to. Okay? But for a person with 4 O-levels, I did very well, became creative director of Saatchi's in Singapore, and then at age 30, I quit my job to go to America because I wanted to go, okay, I've done Asia. Why not challenge the world's biggest market and figure out how you could do? I was at that stage ranked, number 1 by Campaign Brief magazine. So I said, let's try America. So I took a risk to quit the job and then go to America to look for a job, and then found a job with Fallon, which was a very good agency. Came back, started it here. Eventually, 2 years ago, my last position was Vice Chairman and Chief Creative Officer of Publicis Asia. We share about 1,500 people. We had revenues of about 150 million for US for Asia. So it was a big company, relatively. So when it comes to innovation, I've seen it. I've started at a small shop to a big shop, and now I'm currently founder of 99%, which is an SME of one, me. Okay, I'm the only employee. So I get a lot of some of the fears you have, whether you're a big multinational, or some of the concerns you have, whether you're a small SME, when you talk about innovation, because there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of uncertainty. But one thing I can be clear about is that if you do not innovate, you're not going to do well. I'm being polite. You might not survive. Okay? If you think back about exponential growth, there's also exponential decline. 7 years ago, Nokia was worth $100 billion. Right? Today, well, a month ago, Microsoft bought Nokia for $7 billion. Okay? 2007, Apple launched their iPhone, and BlackBerry went like, come on, you know, no one's going to use the iPhone for business. Everyone likes the touchy-feely, QWERTY kind of thing. Where's BlackBerry now? And where's Apple? If you had bought Apple shares in 1999, 98, when it was about what, $20 US, at a peak it hit $600. That's exponential growth. And that growth is fueled by innovation, not just productivity. So you need a combination of both. If you rely too much on one, you're just going to get incremental growth as opposed to the exponential growth you want. So that's my spiel at a personal level. And hopefully as we talk about this, we all go through our personal stories. You get a feeling that this panel is not trumpeting and talking about it off some guidebook that we all read, but we've actually lived through it. And we also like to then, after we finish this, take a lot of the questions, because it seems like there's a lot of questions here, which is fantastic. So let's spend that time answering to the best of our abilities what your questions are. Maybe we can help you along. Maybe if not, we'll learn along the way. Okay. With that, I'd like to pass it on to Gwen.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. So similar to Kelvin, I've seen a lot of innovation, and specifically in my field, I track technology innovation across the world. So for the last 8-9 years, I've worn both the entrepreneur hat as well as investor hat. I started, so I've never had a real job according to my parents. I started a site, a blog, a simple blog online 8 years ago, covering technology startups in Singapore and Southeast Asia. That was because we saw there wasn't any, traditional media were not covering startups enough. So we were like, okay, you know what, internet is growing, companies should be online, let's start something to fill that gap. So 1 year later, the Singapore government came to us and they're like, hey, we have $500 million for internet sphere for the next 5 years. We'd like you to run a fund to invest in these new innovative startups. So I was very junior, we partnered with experienced serial entrepreneurs and investors, and then we formed the fund. So now fast forward to today, I've run the fund, we've deployed all the capital, we have 35 portfolio companies, 2 exits, a few have died, some are still ongoing. And for the blog that I started, that basically started everything, I turned full-time 2 years ago, and I just sold it 2 months ago to another company. So my personal journey has been one that really is not very different from a lot of my friends. I think a lot of them, after 8 years, they still do not understand what I'm doing. My relatives definitely do not understand. My mom still has trouble explaining. My brother's a lawyer, so when my parents meet up their friends, they're like, yeah, my son's a lawyer and my daughter is doing internet. That's it. So people think I'm selling shoes online or clothes, which is nothing wrong, but it's very different. So in my field, I track really the cutting edge stuff. Cutting edge as well as how it relates to commercial viability. So we're talking about, when Calvin spoke about the examples of all the big companies, we track that as well as small startups, how they are doing innovation on the ground. You're talking about, using internet differently to sell to consumers, helping brands reach out differently, basic consumer behavior, tracking how people are using their phones differently and stuff like that, and to tailor business models, new business models to that. So give you an example, there's 7 billion people in the world, right? 4.5 billion have access to working toilets, 6 billion have access to phones. So there are more phones than toilets in the entire world. I mean, to me, this shows that there's a really democratization of internet, the increasing access and speed of, the availability of mobile phones, of technology to people. So I'm interested in all that's here and how it relates to actual startups and companies being able to innovate and use technology wisely. Yep, so that's about it, I think. Thank you.
Okay. So from Gwen's brother, who's a lawyer, to Gwen, who is basically unmarried. That's how her mother would describe her. To Brendan.
Thank you, Calvin. They really picked the panel this year because, like Calvin and Gwen, I left school at 15. I was a hairdresser. So in terms of innovation and reinvention, I'm with these guys all the way. I'm now commercial director for Southeast Asia for a company called Tiger Spike. And Tiger Spike are in the personal mobility technology services space. So what we do is we develop B2B, B2C, and enterprise, increasingly a vast range of enterprise applications for small, medium, and large corporations. And Tiger Spike ourselves qualifies an SME. We've got 200 people globally in 7 offices. And the innovation has happened that both Calvin and Gwen have touched upon over the last 5 to 6 years has been an innovation wave that we as a company have ridden. Okay, so 5 years ago we had 30 people. Today we have over 200 people. And it's that ability for companies, and we at that time were in a mobile space, probably trying to keep our head above water, trying to stay relevant in an industry which we've been in for about 4 to 5 years, which hadn't really delivered the returns that the co-founders and owners were seeking. And it was somebody else's innovation in the industry which allowed us as a business to leapfrog many of our peers in that space, stay relevant, create a new form of relevancy, and move forward to the point where today we've been in the Deloitte Fast 50 in Australia for the last 7 years. I think the results come out today. We're still in there 7 years running. I think there's only one other Australian company who's done that, and we're hoping to make it eight years running next year. But it's the ability for companies to think about what's relevant to them, what you can bring to your business, what you can bring from outside of your business and apply to your business, which can make the difference. Innovation, and I was looking at some of the questions earlier, and I'm sure some of them will come up in this panel. Innovation is not about doing things differently. Okay, it's about doing different things. Okay, it's not about improving what you're doing, it's about doing it differently. And it's that difference which can make the difference between you being increasingly irrelevant in a world that's changing at the pace we've talked about, and certainly from a technology perspective, what drives our business. But it's the ability, it's that difference to make the relativeness for your business going forward. And I think that's what innovation for me in terms of technology and mobility is. So it's a very fast-paced environment. The way we typically tend to advise our clients in addressing these areas and exploiting these areas of technology for the benefit of their business is to think strategically, but to act tactically. So what I mean by that is, by all accounts, develop your strategic goals, your roadmap over an 18-month, 2-year window. Any further than that is irrelevant. You can't foresee the landscape beyond that time frame. But rather than set up large, complex, long-standing projects, our advice simply is to reflect the pace of change in this industry, and it's an industry which affects us all as business people, is to take small chunks, manage your objectives over that journey, and launch, learn, and iterate time and time again. Because that's the only way. You really should be, when it comes to innovation, I think any business person should be looking at planning for success, expecting some form of failure. And failure is acceptable if you learn from it. And you'll learn more from that, I think, than some of your successes. And certainly when it comes to strategically deploying technology, and mobility technology particularly, that would be the approach we would typically take. So I'm delighted to be here. I want to thank SPI for the invitation today. I'm looking forward to answering some of your questions. Thank you.
All right. So, Brenda, I think that's a really good point. I think too many companies these days are run tactically, and they mistake their tactical short-term goals as your long-term goals. So you hit your targets every 3 months, but you're not having a window beyond 3 months to 6 years. So still have a point of view. What is the business going to be like 2 years from now? but then behave tactically, because short term you might have to do certain things. The problem is our short term behavior becomes a long term behavior. And then after 2 years you realize, oh my God, I'm in worse condition and shape than I've been earlier. You know. So let's now move on to Ing Soon. And Ing Soon has been very diligent. He actually has slides.
He's got mine.
Wrong slide though. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ing Soon. I'm from A-Star. A-Star.
Oh, hang on, wrong slides. This
Yeah.
is Brandon's slide.
While I wait for the slide, maybe I just got your introduction. A-Star, as most of you all think of it, maybe really an agency with a lot of technology, but not really for SME. Maybe that's your viewpoint. We don't blame you for that. But I'm trying here to convince you that we do have program for SME. I'm going to share with you later on it. And the other thing is, maybe you think of A-Star giving scholarship. We do give a lot of scholarship. We go through a newspaper, but we actually got quite a lot of program for SME. Allow me to go through some of it. I think Nokia, this is a Nokia phone. I bet most of y'all, if not all of y'all, at least own a Nokia phone in your life. The reason being, Nokia, 6 years ago, actually owned 40% of the world market in mobile phones. However, now own about 14%. And as mentioned by Brandon, Kelvin earlier, it sold to Microsoft for 7.2 million. That's a drastic change in 6 years. So something must have gone wrong there. What? I think a lot of people have thought about that. Let no need to go there. So what we think of is technology. Technology innovation is like nature. Not only the fittest survive. No, in nature, only the strongest, the fittest survive and pass on. So technology innovation is the same. So what I'm trying to say here is another example, Kodak, I think we all know about it, it was actually one of the two big films, camera films then, at time together Fujifilms. Actually, Kodak, as mentioned earlier by one of the speakers, is actually the first company to invent digital camera in 1975. One of the engineers actually invented the digital camera there, presented to management, and guess what the management said? The management said, wow, that's very cute, can you keep quiet? We are not interested in it. Why? Because the business model then by Kodak was making films. So their business model is making better films, a lot of films, just films. So they never think of it as a possible business model. So guess what? Kodak go bankrupt. So we know that actually the film camera have been totally replaced by digital films. So actually now another question that we have asked ourselves is the point and shoot camera is going to be replaced by a handphone. Why? Because now I saw some of you all taking photo here. Will you bring a point and shoot camera to a seminar like this? You won't. Why? Because you have your camera phone with you. So the value you have to think of is you can pick the best point and shoot camera in the whole world. The best. Every review gives you the best. But if your user don't carry them, you have no value at all. So you might well think of what do all the user carry? Most of them carry a handphone with them. So what can you use with your handphone? Right? Another good example is of course e-books. The physical books and borders, they of course be replaced by Kindle Fire. So now we are talking about business model innovations. I'll share with you an example, maybe an overseas example that all of us know, and then maybe a local SME example. My units actually work a lot with local SMEs. We listen to them, we try to understand their needs, and then we talk to all our researchers and then try to implement technical solution for them. A-Star actually got close to 3,000 researchers from 50 countries. So we do know innovation. The question is, are these innovations applicable to SME? That's our main concern, and maybe that's yours. Amazon is a very prime example. You bring out a few times, but in 2013 second quarter, it's 15.7 billion. That's huge. So what is Amazon so different? Amazon start by selling things to consumer. That's their business model. They sell things to consumer. They have a very efficient supply chain, so they don't keep a lot of things. But they still sell things to consumer. But later they realize that, hey, there's another market, you know? So they move on to helping a consumer sell things to another consumer. No? So they become the end commission in between. So there's another business model. Later they realize that there's another market. Now if you go to Amazon, you have a few selections. You can buy the thing from Amazon, Amazon sell it. You can buy a used stuff because someone is selling it. You can also buy from a third party. For example, you buy a computer, a Dell computer, something like that, which is not sold by Amazon is sold by Dell. So there's another business avenue for Amazon. So Amazon actually got 3 business revenue, although it's just one website. So pretty amazing. Just so forth and so on. I think what I'm trying to sell here is A-Star, we have technology, and we can help you. We have programs to help you to compartmentalize your business, to understand your business more, to help you with that. And by the way, it's free. You're from A-Star. And then with your understanding of your whole process, then we can look into your variable provision, supply chain, and target customer, and from then on, help you to see how can technology help you to move on. I think of interest is, there's these SME companies. Really, it's a local example. You know, don't talk about Amazon, don't talk about Starbucks, don't talk about anything. This is a local company, a local SME. This local SME actually is an engineering company. So what they do, they sell hardware. They sell monitoring hardware to companies to monitor temperature, monitor anything. So they sell hardware. So what they notice is, it's a tough business. After they sell the hardware, they need to go and find new customer. Because hardware usually lasts for a while. Then they have to provide warranty services, etc., etc. You realize that it's a very tough business. So what can they do next? So what they do is they realize that after they sell things to customer, they realize some of the customer have a lot of questions. They need a lot of technical support. So a lot of customers, after buying the hardware, don't know how to use it. So what they do, they re-engineer themselves to become a hardware plus engineering service company. So now they don't sell hardware. They actually sell a service. They call the customer, say, oh, you need monitor this. What I can do is I can install my monitor on your site. I can monitor for you. I can generate a report. You don't need to worry about it. You know, just pay me a service fee. Don't need to buy my thing some more. So your fee to you is lower. Don't need to worry about it. So they become an engineering service company. Great. So now, they don't need to worry about selling hardware. They don't need to worry about warranty. They don't need to worry about technical support. They just do services. However, they realize something has changed. Now, the better their business, that means the more site they install their sensor, they need to send engineers to the site to collect the data. So, you know, with engineers, it's quite difficult to employ. Foreign labor may be difficult to find. Then COE is hitting the roof, so they need vehicles to get to the site. They realize that cost is going up. How can I do it better? So what they do, they leverage on technology. Okay. So now what? They realize that if they just modify the hardware a bit, put a data transmitting device together with the hardware, just put a SIM card in it, in the local area, just do local Wi-Fi, send it to a centralized device, just 3G it to their control center. That's it. Voila, they don't even need to send engineer to the website anymore. They just go, they just have a central control agency. All the data from all the sites will just send to their central monitoring stations. They know what is happening at all sites. And you know what? Now they don't need to employ as many people. Seriously, they need to have less people. And then now they can sell higher value data to the customer. Because now they call a customer, I can give you real-time data. Is that good or bad? Depending on what business this customer is in. But they can give you real-time business. So with that, they charge a customer higher. So what they do is now they need to employ less people. They need to have less car. They can sell higher value data. So less cost, higher profit. So it's just a real example of a business model innovations of a local company. Something that is very real. So what can A-Star do for you? As I mentioned earlier, A-Star actually got 2 big programs for SME. So we have the Get Up and as a TAP. Get Up is focused on helping SME upgrade their capabilities. One of our flagship programs under is T-Up. What T-Up do is, if SME have a need, have a project and you need engineering, you need scientific personnel, what you do is we can actually second our scientists to you, with you only paying 30% of scientist cost because we got split spring. So there's something very useful. What happens is we actually have scientists that help to company develop new product. We have to set up a new technical department for a company, and actually we transfer technology from overseas as well. Throughout the last 10 years, GET is a 10-year-old program. We actually have seconded 433 RSE research scientists to 251 companies. So if you have needs, A-Star is going to talk to you, do approach us, and we'll try to help you as best as we can. TAP is a new program. TAP is newly launched in July 2013. We'll have our launch event in November. What we do is TAP actually will work with companies, primarily in this 6th sector, and then we'll understand your needs, and we'll go back and find technical solution for you. We have funding to look at research into new solution for you. So my message, A-Star is a high-tech agency, but we do have program for you, and we are willing to talk to you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So now let me hand it over to Gilbert. Gilbert was supposed to start, but then he's the money guy. So he goes, no, let everyone talk about ideas, then I'll talk to you about funding. Okay, so Gilbert.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. I come from this organization called the Employment and Employability Institute. And we are not government, in case you wonder, but what we do is we help the government spend money on companies and workers. So I heard earlier on there was a question on funding, and I think there will be probably more in funding, so I will not go into too much detail. But just to give you a quick overview about what we do, my guys are very hardworking. They prepared a whole bunch of slides, but I think I'll just pick a few to run through quickly. Today, of course, there are many concerns in the industry. E2I has been around for about 5 years, and we have been working with workers, the workforce side and the employer side in the past 5 years, and we have heard many comments from 28 days when every worker wanted a job to today where every company wants workers. Very different sides of the same coin. How do we match workers, jobs, and employers? And in that process of doing things, we actually partner companies and workers in three key aspects of things. I think that's probably what we'll focus on quickly over the next 3 minutes before we can address the questions. One, it's improving processes, raise productivity, really about how do you make the jobs better jobs. So really that when the job's better job, the company can become more productive, more innovative, where innovation today can be productivity tomorrow and becomes a norm the day after. So how do we get that into place in the company, and how can we support companies through funding schemes, packaging such funding schemes? The second area is in the area of workers. How do we get the correct training programs for the correct workforce, and how do you select the workforce that will meet this need? And relatedly is to make the match meet, make the good worker and the good job meet. I think in a very down-to-earth practical way, how do we get these good jobs and the good workers to meet? It's what E2I does, and very quickly, a few of the programs we do, one of them is this thing called the Inclusive Growth Program. It is actually a very ground-up initiative targeted at companies who just have an idea of what they want to do. It could be innovation, it could be productivity, it could be training. And really, with that, how do I become more competitive, and how do I share some of the gains with our workers? So this program will support up to 50% any cost of the project. And many people ask me, do I qualify? I'm an MNC, I'm an SME, I've got 3 people, I've got 300 people, do I qualify? Basically, if you have a project that can raise the value of a job, make the worker's life better, share gains, you find me a project we cannot support. It's rare. The other aspect, I'll skip all this, the other aspect that we work with many companies is really in the area of skills upgrading. And if you look up there, there's multi-skill, upskill, reskill, that's all our terms. Basically, is how do we give someone the skill sets to be able to enter the job, to do the job better, and to move up within the job. And that's how we do it. And again, we are able to work with you to package programs. Some of them could be in the training provider, some of them could be within in-house on-the-job training, and to focus on certain outcomes and to support you into achieving those outcomes through training. Of course, another case study, I will not go to that. And of course, really the last one, really, we run job fairs, we run professional search services throughout rank and file to technicians to the professionals. So if you need such services, we are here to partner you in it. There's no cost, no charge for any company to do this. Thank you.
All right. So I think we'll move to the next part of this talk, which is question and answers. And we seem to have quite a lot of questions, and based on, we're using Pigeonhole, so we get rankings. So if you see some of the questions and you think it's relevant to you, please vote. Then it goes up in the order, and it appears here, and we'll answer them. Okay. So the first one, let me try to put this up. There are many cases of how innovation helps companies. However, what are the failed examples of innovation, and what can we learn from these? So anyone on the panel would like to start?
I'll start, Calvin.
Okay.
I think, I mean, some obvious ones in a way, and I think it's not so much a failure of innovation. Some examples I would use, but it's an example of companies being innovative, either not realizing how innovative they've been in terms of generating ideas or new business models that can take them in a new direction and availing of those or fully supporting those, or indeed creating new businesses which have themselves been innovative and they've created a new sector or new opportunity that's ready to be copied and then they've been overtaken. And I think examples of that would be probably MySpace, which created a social network, which we know in today's technology world and social world, real world, is a phenomenon which is not going away. Whether it's Facebook, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's WeChat, or any of the myriad of social platforms that floats your boat, they're not going away and they've become embedded. MySpace were probably one of the forebearers of that sector, but have been left behind. Einstein talked about Kodak, Nokia. They're great examples of innovative companies who, for one reason or another, either didn't recognize what they had in their IP nest and didn't fully exploit it, or grew, but then rested on their laurels and stopped being innovative. And I think the key lesson from that is innovation. I think Christine talked about it earlier. It's a culture. It's something which, if you have it, you shouldn't lose it. You should try to keep it and encourage it and keep feeding it. Because if you stop innovating, and all the more so in today's world and tomorrow's world, because the pace of change is so fast, if you stop innovating, you won't just stand still. You're going to get left behind. And I think that's probably one of the key lessons or takeaways from some of those failed examples.
Yeah, so the thing about innovation is that it's a constant experiment. But when you experiment, while at the same time you have to keep in mind that you shouldn't be always looking at practical innovations only, right? So you should innovate with a creative mind. But at the same time, when you think about it from a business point of view, you always want to have a return on that. So when you talk about returns, you need to think then about market. So along the last 9-10 years, when I see companies, what they have done, what they have invented may be very innovative, but they were way ahead of their time. I'll give you an example in the US. So some friends of mine, in 2005, 2006, they started a location-based instant messenger. So which means that, in the past we had MSN, ICQ Online, and MSN Online, Microsoft Messenger, right? Whereby you go in, you can chat with friends while online. Metro was a location-based messenger, which means that when you log on, they can tell where you are, and let's say you say, okay, you want to find, suddenly you need to iron your clothes, and you want to find, you don't have an iron right now, you're like, hey, you blast out to your friends, within, say, 3 kilometers radius. Anyone has an iron who can lend me, for example. This was 2005, 2006, but the company died. But today, we look at all the technology now, location-based services have grown and exploded. Foursquare, there's so many other companies that have been bought by other bigger companies. So when we look at innovation again, it's about making sure that you innovate, but don't innovate too far ahead of your time. So think locally. When I think back to some of the investments that I made with my fund, we invested in 2 companies that were super exciting back then. This was like, say, 5 years ago. Google had they bought a company called SketchUp, whereby it was super easy to create like 3D models and can easily spin and stuff like that. So we invested in one solo guy. It's a foreign entrepreneur from Belgium. They're based in Singapore, who invented exactly like this, but way before Google bought SketchUp. But long story short, it was ahead of his time, and not only that, the second problem there was that he was a solo founder. So my second point is that innovate with a short-term, medium-term market size in mind, but at the same time, make sure that there's a team around it to bring business-mindedness, to bring that innovation to commercial users and commercial purposes.
So for me, I have a couple of points about failure. I think with Kodak, and the same can be said for Xerox. Xerox invented the first personal computer. So Kodak invented digital camera, and then they said, no, our business model is currently making money on film, so we're not going to do that. That attitude from a company point of view is, I'm going to do what's right for the company. I'm going to make money based on what's right for the company. But don't forget, we're all in business. If we're in business, then the customer is king. If the customer is king, then the question should be asked, does the customer want digital cameras? And if the customer wants digital cameras, then you have to go, eventually they will want this product. How do I migrate the business there to that point when it's ready, I'm there at the forefront, rather than killing it in the 70s. So to Brandon's point about long-term, short-term thinking, short-term thinking is, I'm not making money off this, so let's kill the digital camera. The long-term thinking is when you put the customer at the core of your business, you go, he will want this at some point in time. Let me get ready so that I can introduce and start thinking about the market 10 years ahead, such that I train consumers to start thinking digital, and by the time I launch it 10 years, they're kind of ready. Because are we living in a world that's moving forward or moving backwards? You know, that's a very arrogant, self-centered way of running a company. Let's be honest. So that's one of the learnings. Because right now you're using a mobile phone, a smartphone that's about this big, right? Would you want to go back to using the brick handphone with 1 hour of standby time? No, right? Technology doesn't move backwards. So it's very presumptuous for a company to go, oh, people are not going to advance, so they don't need it. That's one. The second thing is, from a Singaporean context, we're too afraid of failure. We've been brought up in a system where we don't embrace failure. So when I worked in America, you look at the American attitude towards failure is they see failure as part of success. So in our school we teach, if you don't get the answer, you're wrong. You don't get the answer, you're wrong, you're bad, you fail. But in their schools they teach there's an answer, you get the answer wrong, never mind. But do you know the process? Do you understand the process? Because in life, the answers change. There's no 10-year series in life, and there's no 10-year series to business. There's no guaranteed formula. So we are too afraid of failure. So you look at the startup and the investors in America, sometimes they ask you, how many times have you failed? So if in Singapore you go, oh, I failed once, immediately there's a taboo. No investor will touch you because, oh, you failed once. In America, how many times have you failed? 10 times. Excellent, I'll invest in you because you will have learned your lesson. So that's a different attitude and a mindset and mind shift when it comes to business. Innovation has risks. If you want to come into this and go, I want to innovate but no risk, sure win one, it's not possible. The trick is to embrace that and then be smart about it and go, there's risk, let's calculate the risk factors. But the biggest risk at the end of it is if you don't innovate, you will be left behind. That's a sure thing.
So Silicon Valley, if you have a failed startup before, your market value goes up. Here in Asia, if you failed before, your market value actually goes down. So it's a big difference. Okay.
So and you see the difference between, you know, who's more innovative, who comes up with more global pattern. Yeah. That's all I can say. I'm sorry. I could go on for days. Okay, number 2, the next question. Let me hide. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes. What are Singaporeans most motivated by to change? Tasty subject. Tasty. Who would like to go for this? Gilbert?
Oh, I can. I don't know. I mean, of course, we can always go back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all that. But I think, well, I think that has some value in it. We have, in the course of our work, we have seen many companies change, and about 2/3 of them are SMEs, or 3/4 of them are SMEs. And I think one of the ways which we have seen successful change, and probably a few of them, one, getting them involved in the change early. Number 2, communicating well. And number 3, and I think most importantly, sharing the gains from that change. That seems to be a motivator that will make at least the workforce level motivated to change with you and not work against you. And this is a very important fact. One of the companies that we met with, F&B company, he was sharing that he wanted his workers to embrace a certain type of service where at a certain point in the hour, they'll come out and do a dance and a song. And he was telling me in his home country, they do it no problem. In Singapore, they are just very uptight. They refuse to embrace that that practice. So we were talking about it, and he said maybe a dangle a little carrot that if they do it well, if the company makes this amount of profit, you'll share the extra profit over and above the normal gains. And then one or two started getting involved, and now the company has got this dancing around. So if you go to eat in a restaurant that serves Thai food and they're dancing around, you know how they got the workers dancing. So really motivating, getting them on board early, communicating clearly, and then sharing the gains from that change would be one of the ways which I think can contribute on the ground, and how to make the workforce join you in that change.
My team work a lot with SME. So what actually we notice is, what motivates SME most to change is they know that first, there are successful story before them. It means, for example, we're trying to, after we understand the business model of a company, and then we introduce the technology to them, they say, okay, this technology will help you. The first question that comes back to us is, are we the first one? Someone tried before? Someone in my business tried before? Because in our business, sometimes we actually have introduced technology from other sector. It can be used successfully in other sector, but never been in this sector before. So we try to introduce this technology to company sector. That is a question. So I think SME are pretty conservative in nature, especially when they invest money, when they invest time into a technology that they are not familiar with. They usually don't want to be the first. So what we have seen, what we're trying to do is we're trying to convince the SME that we are here to help them, we are here with them all the way to motivate them to adopt this change. So you ask me, from the experience that we have gathered, they don't want to be the first, they want to know their successful factor before them, before they are willing to change their way of doing business.
No, Brendan, I'm forcing you.
I guess trick question for the Irish guy then. I think, whilst every nationality, or region of nationalities in some cases have we all have our own idiosyncrasies, and but I think change, and particularly change in the workforce, regardless of what type of workforce or industry it is, or work sector or industry it is, I think is a global. I think the global motivations are very similar, and there's none occurrent there. It's human emotion, and it comes down to, we spend a lot of our time, day in, day out in the workplace, and I think most people, if you ask them, in many markets around the world, whether it's related to change or whether change necessitates it, I think the motivation for us all is to go in, do a good job, do a great job, be as successful as we can for ourselves professionally, for our family, for the firm collectively, and be recognised for that. And I think if change is part of the culture of that organisation, those people who are more willing to change and be the early adopters of change, or the drivers of change, will rise to that challenge. But I think you'll find that in many cases the rest of the workforce, who may be less adroit at the challenge that change presents, will still follow. And they'll follow because the workplace changes, and they'll follow because their colleagues and peers change, and they'll follow because it suddenly doesn't look like change. It becomes the new normal. And I think it's less about motivation for innovation's sake. I think it's more about innovate, provide the culture which allows your workforce to be as happy as they can in a world that's changing, and you'll find, I think, innovation may come easier than you think, and you're not necessarily trying to motivate your staff particularly to follow suit.
I don't think people like to change, full stop, in general.
Yeah, that's true. We're very resistant to change. People tend to be very resistant to change.
So the key thing, I also say that because I think there's a tendency for, everyone in general, right, to be a bit too comfortable sometimes. And the danger is that when you're too comfortable, you don't look towards the future, because then you're not innovating, because there's no need to innovate. It's not necessary anymore. So, give you an example from an entrepreneur's point of view. So in Singapore, there's a lot of funding available for startups. And along the way, I've seen a lot of entitled entrepreneurs. I'm a Singaporean, so I can say this. In general, Singaporeans are quite entitled. And I see that very, very prevalent in entrepreneurs as well. So when I was running the fund, entrepreneurs actually came to us and they're like, okay, will you or this other fund us? I'm like, so what if we're all kind of part of the same big general pool of private and public money? Doesn't mean that we'll fund you, right? So I call these entrepreneurs grant-entrepreneurs, because all they do is chase grants after grants after grants, and are super comfortable. You know, it's fairly easy to get money if they're good enough. They pay themselves a $600, $1,000 stipend. A lot of them are young people, so they can make do with that amount of money, and they like the entrepreneurial lifestyle. And are they really innovating? Not really, not all the time, not always. So that's the thing, they're too comfortable, and even though they are supposedly in the business of innovation and change. So I think the motivation, I think a lot of it has to be self-driven in terms of wanting to change the world in a very big way, or fear, that you're losing out. That's a big thing.
So my again, like when I'm Singaporean, so it can be insulting to a Singaporean. I'd just like to say, what everyone talked about, culture is a long-term shift, incentives is a short-term shift. Okay, so just bear that in mind as I talk through this again. Singapore has this really short-term incentive-driven kind of objective. People not having enough children, let's give you money to have more children, right? Not studying hard enough, let's have this. So everything's money-driven. So let me give you an example. There was an experiment conducted about education and systems. So there was one group of students where they tried to inculcate the values of curiosity, being able to ask questions and to find the questions out for yourself, and get them, it's harder, but get them this love for learning. That was one group. There was another group that they paid the kids $2 to read a book. Every book that you read, I'll pay you $2. That's the incentive-driven model, right? What they found out was these kids are not stupid. They read a lot of books, but as they go along, they read shorter and shorter books. All right? 5-page books, because they wanted the money. And then when you ask them, what do you read? I don't know, I can give you the outline. So there's short term, which it hits the goal, they read the books. But long-term wise, how does that affect the children when they grow up and become adults? Do they have the value of curiosity and learning? Because in this age, knowledge is everywhere. I used to say this as part of a speech, which is, if Thomas Edison was alive today with so much Wikipedia and all that knowledge, how much more could he have invented? So a child who's not curious will grow up not being able to tap all of that knowledge to improve himself. So what do you want? A short-term shift or a long-term shift or both? And sometimes you need both. A little carrot, but then here's the longevity. A cultural shift. Now, on a bigger scale, Gwen touched on it a bit, which is back in the 60s, when you look at Singapore, what motivated us to change? Fear and desperation. And sometimes, because we don't want to change, we wait until the company is about to hit a bad shape. Then you have no choice, and you're forced to innovate because you have no choice. You have been, the risk of closing the company is greater than the risk of innovation. That's when people start to change. And then go, let's try some crazy new idea. Or let's try the new idea that we had 5 years ago, but we're too afraid to try. So you will arrive at that stage. Singapore was no different. We were nothing. We were kicked out and we were desperate. And then we innovated. So the key thing for successful companies, as you think, like Nike, Apple, Samsung and all, is that even though they're number one in their fields, they haven't lost that challenger spirit. They haven't lost the fact or the fear that they could be obsolete or kicked out or desperate like where they were when they started 20, 30 years ago. And I think that's a key ingredient in successful companies. Not to sit on your laurels, but actually have, you're number one, but pretend you're number 100. Behave like number 100. I think that's a key thing. Okay, moving on. There's hold on. The next question I think is quite interesting. It's got quite a lot of hits. So let me put this question up. I think it's quite a real issue that you face. We have a combination of mature and young employees. When considering innovation, what are the key what's some of the key experiences or knowledge we can learn in managing change for the mature employees? So let me try to get this answer right. It's like the older employees are settled in their way of working, and some might be senior, some might be middle management. So when you come up with new ideas, they go, it's either the not invented here syndrome or young man, you don't know what you're doing because I've been in this business 20 years, that's how we got to where we are. So you've still got a long way to go, or those ideas don't work. So you encounter that. Now, how do we get everyone to be on the same page? That's a question. Anyone wants to start first?
Yeah, I haven't really worked with, I haven't worked at any big companies, so I don't know about the older, entrenched, older people. But for my company, what I realized over the last few years is that you should always err on the side of over-communication rather than under-communication. Because I think ultimately when you have a new process, a new idea, new something that you want to instill across the entire company, or to change across the entire company, I think it's important to repeat, but not nag, but repeat it enough times in slightly different ways to get the message across. For me, that has worked across my company. I had a very small lean team, but a full team members of like 14, 15 people. So yeah, so we try to do our best.
It's a tough challenge anywhere, and I've seen it fail very recently. I saw it fail very recently because the outcome was negative for everybody. There's a company I work with who, in the last month, two very, very senior employees, not very old, not mature in their seniority and experience, but not in their age, have left the company. 16, 17 years experience. And I think that points to a failure of that organization, I believe, and maybe some level of complicitness on the part of the employees. I don't know the details, but Gwen is right. People don't want to naturally change, but where change is required, where you need to do things differently, and innovation is about doing things differently or doing different things. It's not always about invention or simply improvements, but doing it differently. You need to work out ways to ensure that your employee base come with you, and if they're able to, if they're capable of, if they're willing to, you need to work out a strategy with those employees to make sure that they're part of the journey at the outset and part of the journey as it moves through to its goals. And this example, obviously, I think is, without going into the details, I think is an example where an organization tried but maybe didn't try hard enough. And we call it failure because, those guys themselves have lost the roles that they spent 16, 17 years arriving at, and the influence and the cachet that goes with that. But the organization has also lost people with 16 to 17 years of industry experience and experience within that corporation. And that's going to be some form of impact and loss to that business. So it's a very important question. I don't think it's always an ageism thing. I don't think it's always, the risk falls with the mature employees. I think there are many, younger employees who are, given the human nature of it, who are just as unwilling or unlikely to change. But I think having a focus on mature employees, I think it puts it into sharper focus. And I think certainly strategies are required for that. Is it monetary? I don't know. Is it responsibility? Possibly. Is it ensuring that they still feel relevant in a world, in the business world that they've operated in for some time, that is now evolving or changing from how it was? I think that, coming back to the human motivation of things, is very, very important and is often overlooked.
Maybe to add to the discussion, I think communication is very important. Maybe an aspect of communication that sometimes is not done enough in change is the reason behind the change. The why that we need to change, the why and the intent behind that change. And I think when that is communicated and convinced, then thereafter there are two types of employees. You could put it as mature or young, but probably more people who like the change to be structured, or people who like the change to be a bit more organic. And I think how it's implemented could be structured, whether it's more organic or more structured, based on the type of employees you have, and if you need to do it in different ways for different folks. And if you're big enough, maybe you should do that. But really communicating the why behind the reason for a change would be, I would think, the most important. And once the why gets believed in, inspired, and envisioned, the rest is probably just going through the books of change, the process of change.
I can share an example. Recently, we happen to work with SME. The owner is still around, but basically his son had took over the business, so he's second generation owner, you want to say. So basically in his business, it's a small, I would not say small, but it's an SME, so he has a lot of employee that is pretty mature, had worked for his father for many years, and obviously there's turnover, so there's a new employee, so he's trying to implement a technology, something new. So there are concerns from the old employee, of course, employee, and actually he was telling me, the old employee actually watched him grow up. The old employer, his father, literally watched him grow up. So now they give me all kind of advice saying you should not innovate. We've been doing this for 20 years. So we are doing this business. Why should we change all these things? So what did the guy do? I guess he did it quite successfully. I think partly because his relationship with his mature employee is a key factor here. So what happened is he actually sit down with them, go through the changes with them, and take input from them. This old employee, because the employee knows the process very well, take input from them and see how take their input in, make them feel valued that they actually contribute to the change. Okay, so he actually do that with mature employee. So his relationship with the employee is very good, so maybe that's why he can do it. So communication, as mentioned by the other panelists, is very important, and in this case especially important, because he just took over the business from his dad, and this employee literally are his, in Chinese culture, is 长辈, grow up. So communications. Now obviously the other important thing is, maybe joking tell me that he also ensure the guys that, don't worry about new technology, I'm not going to fire you, you'll still be around with us, you're still part of the family, part of the business. So ensuring that technology is not meant to replace human beings, and I think that communication from the bosses or innovations to the employees is pretty important as well. So this is one interesting story that we from our experience during the SME that they share with us.
Okay. I think in my experience, the number one thing is to have a clear vision. People talk about it on the panel, but you need to have a clear vision. And the responsibility of that vision comes from management. You can't abdicate your responsibilities to someone. Now, if your bottom is agitating for change, that's also possible, but then that's a revolution. So management with foresight will institute the change. And management has to be really clear about why they're changing and what the change is going to be. So it's less about old or new. Once you get that clear and everyone's behind you, then it's not old people, old mature workers want to do it this way, young ones want to do it this way. For me, what's been really helpful is not concentrate on these two groups, but focus on the customer. So if the customer goes, I want change, then you tell the mature workers, this is the way you've been working, but it's not working now because the customer wants this. So the guy can go, no, that's rubbish. I go, okay, I want to do this, or it worked for 20 years. Okay, but the customer wants this, so I leave it up to you. Do you want to create a product that no one wants to buy because they've moved on? Or do you want, which then results in us not having a job, you included, or do you want to follow the customer who wants this, and then let's try to find a way where we can keep some of the tradition, some of your style of working, but then evolve the product into something the customer will buy. So then the common goal is usually about what the customer will buy or wants. So you take the argument and the discussion away from, this is how I've been working all along, and this young fart is trying to tell me what to do, right? I said F-A-R-T, it's not the other word. And you just use the customer as a leverage to help explain why you have to change. If the customer doesn't want to change and wants this product done in the old way, then then of course don't change. So it's a simple enough thing. Yet sometimes we let all these conversations and different kind of objectives kind of muddy and cloud our thinking. Okay, is there anyone wants to add anything else? We can move on to another question, which is I think quite relevant to this. It says, What happened to it? Here it is. Sorry. Does innovation or productivity come first? Chicken, egg. Anybody wants to answer?
Innovation then productivity. Because in my opinion, with innovation, you may sacrifice, we talked about it earlier, sacrifice short-term and perhaps even medium-term goals, ROI, a lot of expenses out first, but then you reap the benefits only later. And when you reap the benefits are exponential. So I believe in that much more. So when exponential growth, exponential productivity.
I think that's reflected in some of the examples that have been put forward. We typically use new startup companies to demonstrate how significant exponential growth comes from innovation. The inverse of that is existing companies you would expect to have some form of productivity for some time to be in business, to be relatively successful or highly successful, but then might find themselves in a position where they need to focus on or embrace a process or an ongoing culture of innovation. So I think it depends on the circumstance, and I think there's room for us to sit on the fence a bit here and go, in some cases innovation comes before productivity, and in others productivity comes before innovation.
I think in most cases, probably I agree with Gwen. Innovation comes first, and innovation becomes productivity for your organization downstream. And if you continue to do that for long enough, it becomes the norm. So you need to keep innovating to keep having productivity the next day, and before that becomes the norm, to innovate again.
One additional thing is that I also think you can innovate for productivity, and I say that I'll give you examples. So in the internet sphere where I mostly track innovations, you're looking at new companies who are creating completely new ways of working with consumers and with how to use technology. And from day one, it is productivity in a sense that it's extremely effective. The consumer can create a step. In the past, say in 3 steps, they need to get from point A to point B. Now, in 1 step, with this innovation, they can do it in just 1 click, for example. Talk about Amazon, that 1-click purchase. You save your credit cards, and then in the future, you can just buy your books with 1 click. I do that all the time with my Kindle. That's why I have too many books on my Kindles. So something like that. So you can be innovating to really shorten a process. And actually that could actually immediately get you a lot of revenue, because from 3 clicks to 1 click, more likely you get more buyers, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Just to that point, especially for the SMEs, like me, my company is just me. Do I need to go and hire an account person to go through all my bills, etc.? Or even when I was running that large network, we still did things in the old way. So there's still innovation for higher productivity, not just higher productivity onto itself. So for example, your expenses, you still have to, my account department then was all, they're all sticklers for rules. So you have to photocopy, you have to stick it on a piece of paper, and then write the date and all. Then I go, how 20th century is that? Why? And there are all these free software out there that lets you now take pictures of your entertainment bill and take a picture of who you're having your lunch or dinner with, so you can't bluff anymore, right? And then you send straight to accounts, and there's no paper trail, but there is a digital file, and that's free. So for SMEs, if you're not innovating and thinking that way and still employing accounts clerk to do these things, then it's your fault that you're not keeping up with the 21st century. So there are all these things out there. Just go and explore, and they're free until you reach a certain size. Then they start charging you.
Yeah, one more example is that I sign legal documents using digital signatures. I think that's getting increasingly common now. HelloSign.com is a US company.
I think they are not exclusive. For example, the example I give for the local SMB, actually innovate business model, but at the same time actually include higher productivity of per worker basis. So depending what you innovate for. If you innovate for a new product, then there's likelihood that during the innovations it may result in lower productivity, possible. But if you're looking at business process, you can innovate at the same time gain productivity. So frankly speaking, I don't see they are exclusive. Actually, they complement each other quite well for most of the innovations. That's my opinion.
I think it needs to work both ways, right? For me, productivity is producing, being more efficient at producing something. The innovation is the what you are producing. That's how I like to see it. So innovation is the idea. And the idea, if you came first and you had, you are a category first, you have a huge advantage over everyone else. So 120 years ago, Coca-Cola was the first soft drink, so to speak. So once you're first in market, that's the innovation. Once you're in there, then you figure out how to be more productive, obviously. Now, if you're not the first to market, then you come second, third. Then you have to use innovation to catch up. So, no, you have to use productivity to catch up. So, for me, if you are in the business of coming up with a brand new idea, you need to start off with an innovative idea and then figure out how to be more productive. If you're in a business where you're not about having the innovative idea, then you have to be more productive. It's a constant no-win game. The only way you can win is to apply productivity or this culture of innovative thinking into productivity. Right? Keep challenging yourself and go, why must it be done this way? And once you have a solution, you keep challenging yourself and go, is that business as usual solution or is that business unusual solution? Then only then can you figure out whether you are truly innovative or not. Do we have time for one more question? One more, okay, the judge says one more. Okay, there are 4 questions. Let me read out and let's see. They're all ranked about equally. Can we learn anything from our local startups on enablers and motivators? Number 2, any concrete examples we can learn from to practice innovative culture? Number 3, how do we know which is the right culture to implement to maximize results for a company? Number 3 is kind of hard. I don't know what company you're in, so I can't advise how to implement or to maximize results. So I'm going to drop that. Concrete examples we can learn from to practice innovative culture. I think we talked about it a little bit. Challenger mentality, and it's a mindset, so it's a mindset shift. Can we learn anything from our local startups on enablers and motivators? So I think let's answer that question. And I think Gwen would be the best person at the moment to start off with.
Okay. Yeah, so number 1, I don't really understand what does enablers and motivators mean in this sense, but I will talk about just what can we learn, can I interpret it as what we can learn from startups? So yeah, we really track a lot of startups across Asia because my company, the company that acquired my company is called Tech in Asia, techinasia.com. There we publish news and we feature up-and-coming startups from Asia to the world, so it's in English. And there, when we talk about startups, we're always looking for companies that, again, innovate new stuff or can be innovating in traditional businesses. So you're talking about even in construction industry, there are some startups, like there's one in Malaysia doing stuff in the construction industry. So what we learn from all these is that, you know what, it doesn't mean that you have to always deal in a completely new market. There can be a lot of things can be done in traditional industries, and there are startups doing that. But the key thing that, and related to one of the few other questions, is that what kind of frameworks or what kind of thought processes you can use to assess your ideas is that always when you try to look at something and you want to improve, you want to innovate, look at making sure that you can do small little experiments to test your idea, to test your market. So in the web startup world, we use this process called lean startup. So it's about, you think that, okay, your ideal target customer is this certain type of person. Go to speak to at least 10 of these people to see whether they will even buy your product. Stuff like that. So yeah, I can see the time is running out. So if you're interested to be connected to startups, you can email me, gwen@techinasia.com, and I'll be happy to talk to you.
I think for a brick and mortar world as well, if you're thinking of, say, starting a restaurant, rental, employees, and all these costs are very high. So to go in and start a new restaurant concept requires a lot of capital, and you need investors, and the risk is huge. How many of you have started your own company? And your default position when you start out is failure. No one starts a company being a rip-roaring success, right? You start off going, my position here is failure. Any money, and as I build it on, it becomes successful. So in her world, that's a digital way of doing things, which is fine. In the brick and mortar world, there are also various ways of just being innovative and smart about doing things. So instead of then putting so much money into a restaurant and capital investment up front, you can do a lean model here as well. There are people now running food trucks. So you can hire the food truck for 2 days or 3 days, do your food, run your restaurant menu, try to build up clientele, test your recipes, test your point of view about a restaurant, and see whether there's a market out there that will bite or not. And that's a lean way of starting up. Rather than, oh, here's always how F&B does it. Because the F&B model in Singapore is also in a difficult position. You sign a lease for 2 years, and you hope to break even in 3 years, and then comes 2 years, the landlord jacks up your rent by 40%, and then you decide, do I go in deeper and hope to recover and pray that in 2 years' time he doesn't jack it up by another 40%, or do I quit now and take the loss? That's what's happening. So if you accept that as the status quo, then you go, I can't innovate, then you feel helpless. No, you look at examples like, if that's happening in a 21st century business model, how can we replicate it in this world? So I think there are opportunities out.
In terms of local startups, I want to use one example which some of you may be familiar with. It's in the retail space. It's a company called Redmart. And Redmart started about 12 months or so ago, and they've gone from zero revenue to I think a run rate of about $4 million a year. Okay, so whatever the margins are, whatever operating costs are, it's separate. But what they've sought to do is take a model. So they haven't invented anything. That's the key thing, right? We're talking about innovation and productivity. We're not talking about invention. They've taken a model that's worked elsewhere, so Okada in the UK, and other operators in different countries, and they've applied it to Singapore. Now, what they're doing is being innovative in the sense of an entrepreneurial, starting up a business where they believe a change to the sector, an innovation to the sector here in Singapore can deliver some benefits to them as a company. They can carve out a market share which makes it worthwhile for them. So they're being innovative in that respect. And I think the lesson from them as a startup is that you don't need to think about it as an invention. You don't need to have the next big idea. You need to have an idea of what will work either for your business or in your marketplace where you can improve on or do differently an existing idea. A comparative example of that is, and I'll sort of lead to this, is if you live in San Francisco or the San Jose Bay area, you can get your groceries delivered to your door the same day as well. You order online to an app. The surprising thing about that is the company who delivers them to you is Google. Right? So Google now, in those two cities, deliver your groceries same day. Now that's a company that's been around about 14 years. You think of them as a new media company. They've been around 14 years, 4 years longer than my company. And the reality is that what they've done, they've been innovative in their business to look at an opportunity in the marketplace which actually plays to some of their strengths. So they know a lot about us of a personal basis. So they're using their wealth of data and information about the individuals and their street mapping and geolocation capabilities to deliver a new service which is absolutely non-core to where they mostly generate their revenues from. And if other companies do that, we'll bring it back to Singapore, if SingPost, as an example, which is an example of a former monopoly or a monopoly organization which is now looking at a scenario whereby the future for them looks bleak if they were not to innovate. How about, how far-fetched is it, for SingPost to look at Redmart and see what Redmart are doing locally, and to look at Google as an example of a mature company, relatively mature company, and innovating around their business model by leveraging some of the key data attributes they have within their business, and take a similar approach. How far-fetched is it for SingPost to be delivering your groceries in 6 months' time or 12 months' time? Probably not that far-fetched.
So I think there are lessons we learned from both startups and established companies and how both play their hand. What's motivating and enabling a startup to become a startup? What's also motivating and enabling an established company to create and innovate around new market opportunities for themselves. So I think we need to be very careful that it's not simply about startups. I think most of the people in this room work for established companies, and to focus on startups is probably a little bit off-putting. But it's about ensuring that you certainly take the lessons and try to apply those, and really it's about spotting gaps and spotting opportunities.
So, to sum up, I think Amazon's doing delivery of groceries now as well.
Yeah.
So to sum up, it's if SingPost is stuck and vehemently determined to only deliver packages and letters, then you find that it's a shrinking, dying market. But if they're willing to adopt a startup's mentality, which is I'll go where the customer is and I'll take whatever I'll do whatever it takes to get and give the customer what they want, then the customer is now heading in this realm of home deliveries, home shopping. That's how I should be more involved in, and then evolve. So not being stuck in this is what I do and this is what I do well and that's the only thing I can do, to this is the core competency, but how else can I fit in this core competency into the rest of the modern world? So I think that's any last words? So I'd like to thank the panel. They've been very good, and I hardly knew any of them. So this is a panel of strangers, but it came across as if we knew each other for years. Okay, I knew Gwen for many years. Then that's all down to me. No, that's all down to the panel being so great. So hopefully you guys learned something along the way. We learned something along the way, and you can find us all individually on LinkedIn, or you go to the Singapore Police. There's some records lying around. You can find them, and feel free to contact us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.